People talk behind your back, guaranteed. But all of that stuff isn't the point. The point is, do we know how to love each other anyways? Do we know how to be vulnerable anyways? Do we know how to trust that people are good anyways? Do we know how to have real relationships anyways? And when we make that choice, heaven recognizes it. It's like unity is beautiful. And God is going to train us on how to be in harmony with each other. He's going to train us how to do that. And I could just, when we were praying the Spirit, Holy Spirit's just talking about, look at the new flavor that's getting released, because people are interacting with each other. They're going deep with each other. They're getting vulnerable. They're talking about their humanity. They're talking about the reality of their own fears, and they're willing to work through them. He really likes that. He really, really likes that. I'm overwhelmed with the idea that Peter did not show a change in his lifestyle between the time that he denied Jesus and the day of Pentecost. All he had was wanting reconciliation with Jesus, but it didn't show, it wasn't that long after. It was only 50 days, so you have the specific time, and then all of a sudden, bam, what changed in him? Jesus took him in his humanity, put his Spirit on his humanity, and used him in the midst of his humanity. Not in spite of it, but with it. And that's what he's doing with us. So, go ahead and have a seat. Go ahead and have a seat. We'll have some very nice, easy discussions on some light reading that you've been partaking of. You guys,
No? Can you see me? Huh?
Really small.
I look really small. I'll stand. So this morning, I woke up and I was still feeling kind of crummy. And I woke up. Craig's like, God gave me a verse for you. I'm like, oh yeah? What is it? Mark 2:11. I'm like, Mark 2:11. Grab my phone. Mark 2:11. Take up your mat and walk. He didn't know. God really did give it to him. Like, he didn't know what it was until he looked it up.
That's good.
that's awesome.
I was like, okay. Yeah. But I actually, I had to step into it in faith, and I actually started feeling better, so. Take up your mat and walk. I walked, all right. I took out my pillow because I couldn't carry my bed.
Your mattress and walk.
Totally
We moved that upstairs.
All right, before we get into the chapters that we read for today, for this week, I wanted to start on a little bit of a different note. Matthew 11:25. I praise you, Father, Lord of heaven and earth, because you have hidden these things from wise and learned, and revealed them to little children. Yes, Father, for this was your good pleasure. All things have been committed to me by my Father. No one knows the Son except the Father, and no one knows the Father except the Son, and those to whom the Son chooses to reveal him. Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. That is so good. So good. I am gentle and humble in heart. Talk to me a little bit about what about this phrase gives you rest? What about Jesus being gentle and humble in heart? Gives you rest.
But he doesn't lay the heavy burdens on us, we lay them on ourselves.
Yeah. Christianity is not about performance, right? He's not laying that on us. We lay that on ourselves.
But he's not trying to punish us.
He's not trying to punish us. Yeah. When we think of the word yoke, we think of something heavy, right? But he says that his yoke is light, his burden is light, and his yoke is my yoke upon you, I'm gentle, my yoke is easy and my burden is light.
It's just like hard to figure why we make it so hard.
Yeah.
You know, it's like we look at all the things Jesus said and go, why am I thinking so hard? Why are we making it so hard?
Yeah.
We just seem to be able to complicate
Yeah.
what he's made simple.
Yeah.
I think also that it has to do with relationship, you know. He's not holding anything over us, you know. See, you're doing all of this stuff and I'm just holding this over you and, you know, you're bad. He's taking the yoke away,
Yeah.
almost like taking away the veil or the cloud, that thing that would stand between us and God, so that we're just face to face with him. We're
Yeah.
like we're sons and daughters, you know. So it's not a business transaction. It's like, you know, I took care of it, you know. Just come to me, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Today I was feeling overwhelmed and I was like, God, what is going on? And I heard him say, you're expecting too much of yourself.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a good one.
Well, and saying humble of heart
Mhm.
for me, and of course gentle, is like makes him very approachable.
Mhm.
But like humble of heart, for for him to say that, it makes it seem like he thinks I could bring something, to him.
Explain that a little bit to me.
Well, like I think in human pride, I think sometimes people, I perceive that they don't think I have anything to bring to them, people that are either more educated or more experienced in certain areas, their kind of presentation is that they kind of have it all together,
Right.
and so like I don't really have anything to offer them
Right.
that would further them. And so for Jesus to say humble of heart is like an openness and
Yeah.
humility, so that I could bring something to the relationship
Right.
besides just myself, but just I don't know, I'm
Well,
having trouble.
Yeah, no, I
finding words, but-
like so this phrase my my yoke, and correct me if I'm wrong because you've been studying Hebrew culture, but it was also a concept used with a rabbi and the person who was going to then come under the rabbi's teaching, and the rabbi it's because it wasn't just a relationship of you're going to sit there and I'm going to teach, but it was a very intimate relationship of everything that I am, I'm going to transfer to you, because it's not just what I've learned in my head, but it's I have become the Torah, like I've consumed it. I've wrestled with it in my life. I have been, honest and integrous with seeking to live it, and all of that. So not just the word, but my life and how I've wrestled with it, all of that I'm giving to you. But if you look at how, Jewish rabbis interact with the people that if you've ever watched, I've never seen them live, but I've watched the movies that depict this Fiddler on the Roof. Have you ever seen Fiddler on the Roof? And the rabbi's there, and he has his people, the men around him, and the way that they are discussing, to somebody on the outside, almost looks like they're arguing at times, because they're presenting ideas in a way where where the rabbi is not intimidated by being challenged or by being questioned, not in a disrespectful manner. It's not coming from a disrespectful manner. It's just coming from, he understands, the understanding of, I am teaching you, but I'm wanting you to own it. So I understand that you're going to wrestle with it and you're going to think through it, and you are a thinking person, and you are, you're going to have opinions about this, and you're going to bring them to me, and we're going to talk about them, right? And so when you say that, that's the picture that a lot of times we just have these images of Jesus because we take places of the Bible and it's almost like we just cut them off, and we have like, this is Jesus, right? And then we forget that he was a man that was living life with his disciples, and that the way that we seem to, because we in messages on a Sunday morning, we get one verse or one picture or one story, and then we kind of divide things up into segments and don't look at the whole picture of who Jesus was and how he lived and walked with his disciples, and that they saw him and that they were with him, and that he was a man. And so, we look at him, again, we talked about this a little bit, we look at him and we just think God, Jesus, God. But he was a man, he was walking, Hi. Yeah, I can see you sweating, I can see you struggling. No, you know what I'm saying? Like, right? They knew him as a man. And so, there was all these things that they were engaging with Jesus in a way that a lot of times we don't, and I think that we miss out on understanding the totality of who Jesus is. He's not just divine. He's human. He came to bring all things together. So all of these realities together exist in the person of Jesus, right? And it is a place where, Craig and I have been talking about this, we've been meditating, it's like a lot of times you see people who are in the ministry, pastors, preachers, and you see us in one one phase of our lives. You see us at the moment where you encounter us, in that stage where we're going through, in the places where God is speaking to us at that moment. And in that phase, in that moment, we might be camped on one particular place, right?
Yeah.
And but you also don't see the history of where God has brought us, how God has led us, and the totality of that. And beyond that, obviously, we're just one person, but if you look at the history of the church and you begin to study the lives of the men and women who have gone before us, the totality of their lives, it creates a space for you to wrestle with the things in your life that come up. What happens when I'm going through something? What happens when this idea that I heard on Sunday morning, I thought that was a good word. And then I get into the middle of the week and my life is not looking like that word. So how do I wrestle with that, right? What do I do with that? And so understanding the totality of Christ as human and divine, as the one who tells us, you are now seated in heavenly places and you lack nothing. And he's giving us these words that at times challenge what we feel to be our reality, right? The things that we experience day to day. Well, if I'm seated in heavenly places, how come I can't pay my rent? Right? So how you wrestle with these things, how you think this is part of of this segment, it wasn't just about apologetics. It was about, engaging with you guys in a way of thinking, how you view life, how you go about sustaining the things that you're learning throughout life. And I'm going to touch very quickly on these three points. And I didn't bring my notes for them, so I'm just going to do a very light overview of it. But
So 3 points.
three ways that we deal with doubt. 3 ways that we deal with doubt.
Thank you.
So I have found this subject very interesting because I don't know about you, but my experience growing up in Christianity, there wasn't a lot of room for doubt.
Yeah.
Right? Faith is opposed to doubt. If you have faith, you don't doubt. So there was not a lot of space for questioning and asking. There was not a lot of space for struggling. There was just a lot of space for faith and believing and being strong and pressing through and all those things are really good things. Those are
Some denial.
and some denial, exactly. There's a lot of room for denial. That's not really good. But all these other things are really good, right?
Like,
Like,
oh no, it's not there.
yeah, I'm just gonna press through, right. Yeah. If you're pressing through in denial, that's not really pressing through, that's just denying. Right?
I remember that part.
That's not, yeah, that's surviving, that's sweeping it under the rug, hoping it will never come back again, and then when it comes back, you're like, whoa, there it is again. You know, how many times do you sweep it under the rug? You trip over it. That's you trip over it, right?
Who's talking about the lumps under the rug?
Who was talking about that?
Just, was it Craig?
Yeah, the lumps under the rug? No?
Somebody was talking about sweeping it under the rug. and-
Oh, Shane, that's right, on Sunday. The lumps under the, that's right, you trip over it, you fall on your face.
Yeah.
A lot of people have lost their faith, have lost their way because they haven't learned how to wrestle with these things when they come up. And so let's start with the first one. The first one is the doubt of the emotions. Doubt of the emotions. This is the doubt. These are the things that come up when you're going through something hard, when the reality of your life, when a loved one dies, or you're dealing with depression, or an illness that is not going away, you're dealing with a friendship, a loss of a friendship, you're dealing with the hard things in life, that your emotions, you are sad and your emotions are feeling all over the place. And this is where reading a verse like this is a prescription to your emotions, understanding that you when you look at these places where, how did Jesus wrestle with these things? Well, you look at the Garden of Gethsemane, and Jesus wrestled with it. He didn't want to go to the cross. He was sweating blood. He said, if this cup can pass, let it pass. He you know what I'm saying? Like, his attitude wasn't like, bring it, right? He was having a hard time with what he knew was coming. It wasn't changing his choice to obey the Father. He was wrestling through it. So what did he do? Well, he was in a garden, right? Time in nature, right? A space of retreat, of solitude, of a place to gather your thoughts, to think, to pray, to meditate. But he also wasn't alone, right? He invited his closest friends to be with him. Cultivating friendships is so important. I think I'm going to make a parenthesis right here because I feel that that's something that we don't talk a lot about in Christianity, is how do we cultivate friendships? What does it mean to be a friend? What do you do when you lose friends? It's like friendships, Jesus says that he calls us friends. So obviously friendship was high, right? On his values. He valued friendship. He valued the people around him and the community that he was walking with. His ministry was not about, like, you see it throughout Jesus' ministry. It wasn't about the next crusade or, he was able to speak to thousands and perform great miracles and then go where his Father called him to speak to just one. But through it all, he was walking with 12 and then closely with 3, right? So friendship, community, the people that God is calling you to walk with. Good books, places of rest for your soul. You need your body needs rest. Your body needs to heal. It needs good food. It needs to be taken care of. You need exercise. Right? A lot of times we're fighting these battles and we just, I don't know about you, but I've tended to go to just the spiritual side of things. That's been like where I've gone to, and I do believe that there's a spiritual warfare, that I believe that it exists. But I also know that I need rest. My body needs rest. I need fun. I need to laugh. I need to eat good food and I need to exercise. Otherwise, my body starts breaking down and then my emotions start breaking down and then I'm fighting things that are not even a fight, right? It's just, you just need to rest and get some good food in your body, right? So when you're struggling with your emotions, you need to remember that his yoke is easy and his burden is light. That he is humble of heart. That he says, come to me. I will give you rest. I will give you rest. I have rest for your soul. And you read Psalm 23. He is the good shepherd that leads us to green pastures and peaceful waters. And he gives us rest to our souls. God cares about our souls and the rest in our souls, the peace in our emotions, right? The next one is the doubt of the mind. And the doubt of the mind are the questions that you have. The things that don't add up. When you hear something, when you read something, you're like, wait. That does not make sense. And if you look in the Bible at how God dealt with Thomas, he was so patient with Thomas. He gave Thomas proof of what he was talking about. I don't know if you remember, but I talked about at one point how God gave proof of his resurrection to the disciples. He didn't just say, well, just believe me because I said it. He also engaged with them at a rational, logical level of let me show you, let me demonstrate to you. And he taught them, and he instructed them, and he brought them through the word. Peter says that when he saw the Mount of Transfiguration and the dove descending upon Jesus and the baptism of Jesus, what he says is, now the words of the prophets have been made more certain. So there's you can see it. We talked about how in Acts the disciples, they debated, they argued, they went through the scripture, they talked through philosophy, they engaged with the thinking people of the world. They didn't just dismiss the questions as, well, you just have to just trust me, this is going to be good for you. It's like, no, let's go there, let's ask, right? A lot of times as Christians, because we think we have the answers, we're not willing to wrestle with the questions. And then when the questions rise up in us, it creates a crisis of faith. Instead of understanding that God has a place for us to wrestle. He says, Come, let us reason together. Come, let us reason together. He gives you the mind of Christ. Not just a new heart, but a new mind to think, to engage with ideas, with big ideas and big concepts and innovation and creativity and the questions that don't make sense. He doesn't expect you to just let go of your brain. He's okay with your questions. Come, let us reason together. There's a space for you because here's the thing. It's like if this is real, then it will stand. And if it's not, then why would you want to follow it? Why would you want to follow Jesus or be a Christian if it's not true? I don't want to, I'm not in here just to feel good about life. I think there's other ways I would go if that was the purpose of why I'm here. There's other things I would choose.
Yeah.
But the truth, we talked about this, the absolutes, the truth, the truths of the gospel challenge my life to think about them, to meditate, to go study the lives of great men.
Yeah.
When I read the life of William Wilberforce, we were reading with that, I'm loving the girls' curriculum because it always includes missionaries or just these great men that have gone, and women, great men and women, the cloud of witnesses. And we read through it, and some of their lives are, I mean, they're hard. They were not easy lives. And but you're wondering, like, how did they push through that? How did they keep going? What kept them going through? Man, Adoniram Judson lost 2 or 3 wives. I can't remember right now, but he lost many children. He was in prison. He was tortured. And yet he continued and persevered to write the gospel, the New Testament. He valued the word of God so much that he was willing to die for the New Testament that he had translated. It's just like when you start reading, what is it about this gospel that does that in people's life? Right? It can't just be it just felt good on Sunday morning. That's not going to sustain somebody through torture and persecution and dying wives and dying children. There's got to be more to that. So when you're wrestling with doubts of the mind, there is a place for you to come and ask, to think through, and God is not upset at your questions. Yes.
So I think to that verse in 2 Peter, 1 Peter that says, be prepared to give an answer for what you believe. And so if I just look at that verse and this thing of the mind, it's almost like, well, that shouldn't be happening because you're not prepared to give an answer for your faith. You know what I mean? So that's kind of like what I've wrestled with. It's like, man, if a Buddhist or a Hindu came up to me and talked to me, it's like, what I really, like even the questions that I have, like I'm not, I'm not prepared, Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's a good question, Brian. But how do you prepare unless you wrestle with the questions?
So we're always preparing.
Yeah, it's not be prepared. Ta-da, I'm prepared, right? I've arrived. I've arrived. I am prepared. You never get there. You're always preparing.
That's another good Warren saying, other than reading Romans 6 through 8, is it was really cool. I was blessed to be in one of his Bible studies at my previous church, and he says, we haven't arrived yet, That's like we never arrive, It's just like, which is great, because, gosh, if this was the point where we arrived, we would have so much lack. There would be so much lack, because there would still be all these questions,
Right.
And it'd be like, well, I don't have them, but since I've arrived, there's no way I can find out,
Right. Well, this is when you look at Jesus and he says that he is who was, who is, and who is to come, right?
Yeah.
So there is a was, there is something that already happened.
Mhm.
There's a lot of things that already happened, right? That we already have access to because they have happened. God exists outside of time and space, but we exist within time and space, right? So he has worked certain things in time for us to apprehend. Then there is now he can still work outside of time and space and bring healing to the past, and that's where the prophetic, and we're not talking about that right now, so I'm not gonna go there. But it's very exciting. But we're in the present. He is right now present with you at every moment in what you're going through right now, in every challenge, you have access. So studying what is already yours allows you to step into the present existence of what God has. But he does say that there is to come, right? So if I look at the world around me, I've heard some Christians say there is no spiritual warfare anymore because now we're,
We have the Bible.
huh?
We have the Bible.
Well, because we have the Bible and we have everything, we don't lack anything, and it's like it's all been given to us. And I'm like, I don't know what world you're living in.
Have you read the paper?
Have you read it? First of all, yeah. Have you read it? I mean, there's talks about, but also, I mean, look at the world. I don't know about you, but I don't see the kingdom of God manifested in right? There's a lot that still needs to come and needs to happen. Now, how we approach that, how we go about that, depends on what we believe about what has happened and what is happening. Right?
Yes.
So it does matter to understand what has happened, where you're at, and where you're going. We talked about origin and destiny, meaning, purpose. Right?
Does matter, Jim.
So this is right. So thinking through these things. I have been a question asker since I remember being aware of my brain. I mean, I've just always wrestled with things. That doesn't make sense, God. Well, if you say this, and why does it mean that? Or why am I not seeing it? Well, what happened with this? Well, well, that doesn't make sense. Wait a second, if that person's preaching that, but I'm looking at their lifestyle, is it the teaching that's wrong, or is it that they're just not living it out? Because ideas have consequences, so I'm looking through what are the ideas that they're teaching? Is it their ideas that are leading them to consequences that are off, or is it that their ideas are solid, but their lifestyle is just not reflecting their ideas? So, I think through all these things. Because when I look at somebody who's preaching something and their life is not matching up, then I pause and I'm like, wait. I start asking, like, what is that? If I'm looking at somebody in the world and they look like they're living, amazingly, I also start asking, what are they doing? What's going on? But then I start thinking, what am I not seeing that they're not showing? I just start thinking about things in life in a way where but even just in the church, I know that a lot of times, if we haven't been given the permission to think through what we're hearing, we're expected to just receive it and but you have to be like the noble Bereans.
Yeah.
Right? Or you don't have to, but but it's a good idea.
Paul said it was a good idea.
It's a good idea. You don't have to, but it's a good idea. It says that, when he was preaching to the Bereans, they took his words and then they went back to the Bible and they were going through the Bible. Well, it wasn't the Bible at that point, right? But it was the Torah. They were searching the scriptures to see what he was talking about. That's responsible Christianity. That's where you're engaging with this process, where you're not just leaving it up to somebody to take you somewhere, but you're saying, where is that person going and what are they saying? Do I want to go where they're going? Am I going where they're going? You engage with the process, and you're asking these questions. So, and also, I mean, the truth is that just because somebody's lifestyle doesn't match their ideas, it doesn't mean that their ideas are bad. Otherwise, the gospel, we would just throw it out, right? We know enough Christians that don't live it, that we could say, well, it's that, and that's the argument that you hear from a lot of people. Mahatma Gandhi, right? I love you, Christ, but don't really like your Christians.
You know, it's something I think we see a lot too, is that, you know, you can listen to people teaching and preaching, and they're totally preaching Christian concepts. But the people who are listening are not familiar with the Bible, and then they start saying, well, where's the chapter and verse? Where's the chapter and verse? And it's like, you know, I sit there sometimes and I think, you know, if you knew the Bible, you probably know what the person is saying was right. So there's, you know, there's sifting through that discernment, and I'm not saying it in terms of if you're teaching people who are new in the faith, they do need a roadmap and they need help.
Yeah.
But I'm talking about people who've been Christians for a long time,
Right.
and they cannot discern what the message that's coming, whether it's coming, what spirit it's coming from.
Right.
You know, so that's where we have to stop and go, well, wait a minute, what's really going on here? Because there's people I've heard who had scripture and verse and they were off.
Yeah.
Like, they were off.
Yeah.
And other people that are just talking and it's on. I mean, it's right on. You're going, wow, this is coming straight from heaven.
Yeah. 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 That's really good. Because you're not just picking up what they're saying, but the spirit that they're coming from, right? So it's not always that I don't sit there and question everything that I'm hearing, right? I'm not like going, oh, I don't know if I'm gonna believe it until I go research it, right?
Until I Google it.
Yeah, until I Google it. Then I know. That's really good.
Ask Siri.
Ask Siri. So yeah, okay, Google. I'm not doing that, but when I'm feeling something that way, like I don't know if I believe that.
Yeah.
Oh wait, I don't know if I agree with that. I don't just go past that. I think about it. I pray about it. I search it out. Or if I'm feeling something weird, I'm like, I don't know how I feel about that. But so that, huh?
That's good.
Yeah.
If you don't have that, you're such a, like, why do you call that horse? So you use that thing?
Blinders.
Yeah.
Man, it just freaks me out that people don't actually do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know?
And unfortunately, a lot of Christian culture has done that.
Weird, just
It's
believe in that
yes.
concept. Like,
Yes.
what?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and that process does a lot of things. If you end up not agreeing, well, then now you know what you believe. But also, it challenges you to question what you're believing, because maybe you're the one who's wrong. Maybe you're not agreeing and believing because something inside of you needs to change. But if you don't go and ask and research and question and wrestle through it, you're just going to go, I don't agree, and walk away without letting the word challenge you and the word, penetrate your heart and go deep into who you are. And the last one is the doubt of the will. And I think this is the one that a lot of, most of us have experienced when it comes to doubt. But this is the doubt that God says he doesn't like. This is the doubt that says that a double-minded man will be tossed and turned by the waves. That if you've put your hand to the plow, don't look back. Because he loves people of faith. So this is a different kind of doubt. This is a doubt whose prescription is challenged. This is a doubt where once you've decided, once you've said yes, once you've committed, then you shouldn't be like a double-minded person, because you will be unstable in all your ways and you will not feel the steadfastness of faith in your life. You will be confused and you will be constantly doubting and uprooted, and there won't be a secure foundation because you're being tossed and turned and you're following any wind of doctrine, and you're not rooted. And so that's the one where God challenges, right? That's the one that is met with a challenge of get up, right?
Yep.
Grow up. And a lot of times if you don't recognize that, maybe you're in that challenge because you are in that place because you haven't wrestled with the other things. You haven't given yourself permission to go through the doubt of the heart and the doubt of the mind, to wrestle, to ask, to meditate, to ponder, to grow, to come to Jesus and ask and receive from him. To be led into good pastures and peaceful waters, to go into the word and what does Jesus say about this? What does God say about this? What does the word say about this? If you haven't given yourself that permission, then you're probably gonna end up just in this third doubt, and you'll constantly be tossed to and fro because you don't know what you believe.
That's right.
And because you don't know what you believe, you don't really know how to feel about it. And so then your emotions are dictating your life up and down, up and down.
Or the beliefs are wrong.
Or the beliefs
So
are
then
wrong.
something comes up and then it's, it's so difficult sometimes in mentoring when someone is in that place.
Yeah.
When they're up and they're down, they're up
Yeah.
and they're down, and it's not, and we all have our times.
Yeah.
But when it's like this,
Yeah.
it's just like, whoa, where are you now? Are you at the top of the mountain or are you at the bottom of the valley?
Right.
It seems like it's either one or the other.
Yeah.
It's very tiring for
Yeah.
everybody involved.
Is this the belief that relies largely on you're relying largely on your circumstances?
Yeah.
So if things are going great, and God is great. If
Right.
things are going bad, then God really sucks.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Good.
Right. Because he never changes no matter how your
Right.
circumstances go, right?
Yes.
So then you go back to wrestling with, in the midst of your circumstances, what's coming up? What emotions, what thoughts are coming up, and how do I wrestle with those? Not with whether God is good or not whether God is for me or not whether God has a plan for me or not whether this is true or not, but what are the thoughts and the emotions that are coming up, and how do I think and process through these? Obviously I'm not seeing something, or there's something going on, so you go back to these other places.
Something I find myself greatly frustrated with, and friends and family who I'm trying to introduce to more of just more of what I'm learning and knowing, and they're believers and they have been for a long time, but is almost just a refusal to go with anything that doesn't look like what they've always known. Like if it doesn't look like a certain type of church service, if it's not being taught in chapter verse format, if tongues makes them uncomfortable, and it's just like they just want to stick to this zone of what they really believe is the right way of teaching and the right way of worshiping and doing church, and anything outside of that just makes them uncomfortable, and they're not willing to step in a little bit more. And I don't know, I just feel like I keep coming up against this with family and friends, and even to the point where then they're questioning me that I'm in something
You're the crazy
weird
one.
and
Yeah.
off base, and
Yeah.
so much more than the non-believer. And
Yeah.
so
It's sometimes easier.
yeah, and sometimes
to
I'm
share with
there's not
someone
even
who's
any point,
non-believer.
just dealing with this
A
religious
religious
I'm
spirit,
glad
with
you
this
brought that up.
discomfort. It's
Amy.
That's a good one.
it makes me so much more upset than the unbeliever,
Yeah.
talking to a
He's
Hindu
like-
or
He's
something.
like,
I'm
you should know, you should know.
and
Well,
then
I-
they think
I'm glad you brought that up because honestly, going through the training in apologetics has helped me not just for the unbeliever, but for the believer. Huh? The unbelievable, exactly. Because now you know how to think. So look at the thing. What are the challenges that they're presenting, right? So go back to, why do you believe what you believe, right? So then you start having a reason for the hope in which there's a reason why you have stepped into other things. There's a reason why, right?
Oh, yeah.
So as you think about these things, as you meditate and you ask the Holy Spirit, He'll give you the language then to, in a loving way, challenge them. Like, to me, it's like, it's all in the Bible. I mean, tongues are in the Bible, right? Healing is in the Bible. Prophecy's in the Bible. Like, there's so much stuff that is in the Bible that I'm like, what? I don't know. Do you believe the Bible? It's in the Bible.
You've taken like 80% of it out.
That's in the old days, that doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah.
Right.
Says
who?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, it says my pastor.
Right.
My denomination,
Right. So you start heading in those places, right? And it's not bad to get into a debate. Now, hear me. Hear me, please. If your heart is in the right place.
There you go.
Yes.
If you start getting angry and anxious and
Feeling
and
sweating.
you're right, lose your peace, right?
You feel like
You're saying no,
it chokes.
right? So maybe the word debate is not the right one for you, but let's just call it a discussion, a conversation of exchanging of ideas. Because debate might cause you to feel like you have to go into proving mode, right? You don't have to win. That's right. It's not about winning. It's about engaging, not being afraid to go there with that person. Well, why do you think that? Well, talk to me about why do, and a lot of times you just start with listening. Why do you think that?
Well, in my case, they send me articles about that other people have written.
Yeah,
They email them to me.
yeah,
And I'm like, who's this person? Why do you believe that person?
right. And in the same way, you can pull up a different article of a different person. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's what I'm saying. Like, so.
And these articles going back and
Article wars.
Article wars.
That's actually better than the person who just says, this is the way it is and I'm not gonna talk to you about it. And at least they're like, they're drawing something out of you, which means you can draw something out of them.
Yeah, if
You know
they're
what I mean?
sending
There
you
is an
articles,
exchange.
they're opening a door.
There is an exchange.
I mean,
yeah.
unless they don't want to talk about it and they're just sending you articles because they want to.
There you go.
Well, if that's the case,
Let's have a
You can still
conversation.
send them an article back.
you can say, hey, you can say something like, yeah, I would love to have a conversation about that with you. If you really want to talk about it, I would love to talk about it with you. But before that, you have to wrestle with it, process through it, ask the Holy Spirit, engage with it, right? And let your emotions be at peace before you say that. Because otherwise, you'll step into it and then you'll be like, ah, ah. That's what I said, though.
Don't make me
Oh.
That's true.
Smash.
And I visualize like there's a bunch of roots and the roots have the different connections of the lies and basically you're going in there and you're just kind of moving the dirt around the roots and the roots are kind of being exposed here so it's a very gentle moving around. It's not like this big shovel boom, up, because then that's not gonna get anywhere. So I can see that it's just a gentle conversation of moving around the dirt to expose some of the roots to be able to have them be talked about. So, yeah.
And I found that when you're confident because your beliefs have gone from good ideas to convictions, because you've wrestled with them, it's a conviction in your life. It's like I remember being in the in the summer institute last summer at Ravi's Summer Institute. And I think I was maybe one of the only 5 charismatics probably in the institute. And I had some really fun conversations, some really good discussions. Especially in the large group settings where people would say certain things, and I mean, it was open for opinion time, so I would raise my hand and I'd say, well, you know, I don't really agree because da 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 da, and then it would be debate time. But then, and it was a good place to do that. There, you know, nobody was. You could see some people starting to get a little frazzled, but then you just kind of pull back and you let it be what it is. And then afterwards, then some of these people would see, you know, come and talk, and then they'd engage, and we'd have really good conversation. And they would challenge me on some points, and I'd be like, you know what, I haven't thought about that. And on some of the things that they asked me that, and they said, you know, and I was like, well, you know, I really haven't really thought about that. I just know what I've experienced, and I know that I can't go back. But I do need to think about what some of those things mean, because there's obviously some stuff that you've experienced that is putting you off to what I'm saying. So I go back and I process and I think through it, and it doesn't change my conviction about it, but it helps me to see their point of view and to engage with them from a different place, because I'm going, I totally get what you're saying, but this is how I see it, and this is what, you know, when I researched, this is what I found, and this is also how it's played out in my life, you know. So it becomes a place where it's not about convincing them, it's not about changing their mind or winning, it's about presenting your convictions in a way that, because you've wrestled with them, they hear that. When you hear somebody talking about something that they believe, really believe, you hear different than when you're just hearing somebody
Right.
yakety yakety blah blah blah, right?
Yeah.
Just repeating,
Yeah.
right? It's the same when people are leading worship. If you're hearing a person who's singing, not because they just have to, but because what they're convinced about what they're singing, and not just about what they're singing, but who they're singing to and why they're up there. Like there's just a conviction of why we're doing this. It's different than just nice music, right? Somebody can be excellent in music, which we all enjoy, and you know, we want our musicians to be excellent, but there's a difference, right? So I know that right now in my life, my main calling is with my family and with the church. So a lot of the apologetics that I'm doing end up being towards the church. It doesn't, you know, but I've noticed too that when every time I've talked about it, every time I've gone into apologetics and began to purposefully release some of the things that I've been processing and wrestling through, I've gotten testimonies of evangelism coming back to me, which is amazing, because that's something that I wrestled with God. I'm like, well, I'm not out there right now, God, and you know, but it's just like, but you trust me. And so I step into the sphere of influence where God has me right now, to the place where I'm called, and I'm doing this with the church, and then I'm hearing the testimonies of evangelism going out.
Yeah.
Because on it, that's Ravi's team, that's what they say. They say apologetics is all about evangelism. If you're not out there, like if it doesn't translate into the sharing of your faith in one way or another, then there's no point. Then it just becomes head knowledge that you're just puffed up, right? It's just puffed up.
Can I interject something?
Yeah.
Just for Amy, and correct me if you disagree with me, but there is, you know, there's this healthy exchange where you're exchanging ideas and you're discussing. And then there are those people, and maybe this is in your case, that don't want to hear anything you have to say and just want to beat you over the head with their own stuff and tell you how wrong you are. And I think there's some healthy boundaries that you can set up. I think it's okay to have healthy boundaries
Yeah.
in certain cases where you may not have the opportunity for real apologetics because someone's they're just putting up the wall and they just want to tell you how wrong you are and not hear your side.
Would you agree that?
Yeah, it's just.
Yeah, healthy
So
boundaries are
so
healthy.
Right, so I mean, in the case of your family, if whatever, if they're just flooding you with emails or not,
Yeah,
You
it's
know.
not that extreme,
Okay,
but like going
okay.
to the,
You can,
because I don't want you to feel bad if you're, or anybody to feel bad if they're talking with somebody who just flat out doesn't want to hear one word you have to say. I don't want you to think you're doing it wrong, or you're not getting it right, or,
right.
you know what I mean?
you can look at how Jesus sometimes remained silent in the,
Yeah.
when he was being accused or when he was talking to somebody who didn't wanna listen.
Yeah.
They just wanted to, he
Yeah.
sometimes remained silent. But he also engaged with them. But how did he engage, right? He asked questions. He asked them a lot of questions.
Yeah.
He asked them a lot of
And
questions.
kind of put them on the
And
spot.
put them on the
They were
spot,
being accused
right.
or- And then finally, they were the ones that were quiet.
Right. He asked them questions that were meant to challenge their worldview and that were meant to challenge where they were coming from. And so I'm continually praying for an increase of wisdom of asking great questions.
Yeah, great
That's
question.
wonderful.
Great questions.
I like
And
that.
sometimes family is too the toughest, because sometimes people are like, I have all these problems, or you know what the person's life's like, and you're like, I'd like to help you, but they don't really want help. They're just transmitting. They're not receiving.
Mhm.
So too, you have to kind of go sometimes. Well, I'm gonna pray,
Mm-hmm.
and that's happened a lot of times where you just walk away and pray, and then the Lord goes in a way that they can receive because.
On that front, my dad's family, we used to joke that if you looked up Catholic in the dictionary, my grandmother's picture would be right next to it. My dad's family was vehemently not in agreement with what we believed. Vehemently. And they pushed all of my dad's siblings away because my grandmother was so in your face about it. But with what she was saying, it took years. It took years of, you would try and have discussions and it would really just be shut down. It would create a lot of problems with family relationships, but you live. And your life is the testimony they see.
There you go.
And
Yeah.
so
There you go.
the way you live your life, the way you live your life with your girls, the way you live your life with John,
Yeah.
the way you do life, the
Yeah.
way you do church, the way you do community, that all speaks a lot louder than any words you will ever use.
Yeah.
And so when you have a situation like that, like my family now, my cousins, who I literally had nothing in common with for the majority of my life, are now all believers,
Wow.
all of them. And they're
Awesome.
either all believers or they're all going in that direction.
Yeah.
And they're now open to it, and it's really interesting to hear them talk about these things. When you would try and have these discussions 5, 10, 15 years ago, and like my grandmother kicked my dad out of the house because she's like, you can't, you're not going to heaven now, blah, 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 from that extreme.
Yeah.
So your life will say much more than your words ever will.
That's really something, I kind of had a similar experience. There's a person that's a good friend of mine. I was gonna say really good, but I'll say good friend of mine, and he just loves that I go to the Awakening, but not really. And he said, we were watching a UFC event, and so we had some friends over, non-Christian and Christian alike, and he says, so are you still going to that bad church, or, said something like totally like derogatory, and, he's Calvary Chapel background, and so I thought, well, I'm gonna get down to his kind of let him do it like they would do it and say, well, show me scripturally where this is bad. And he goes, well, there's just a lot of questions. Okay, where? Well, there's just a lot of questions. So he can't, there you go. He can't do it. So it's really cool though, because my former roommate is like really good friends with him, and he would say, well, Jason said this, and this, and so You're like, okay. And so we got into a discussion about Bethel, who my roommate still was kind of like, and I said, let me tell you a little bit about the pastor from Bethel. And now looking back on it, I kind of appealed to the humanity aspect of it. I said, yeah, they really believe in healing. And I said, they go after cancer and they pray as though somebody's going to get healed. And a lot of times they get healed. But I said, let me tell you a story. The lead pastor that's there, the senior pastor, we went up there and I think it was 2005 and I mean, he was on the verge of tears when he was doing his the conference that we went to, and the reason he was on the verge of tears is he had just lost his dad. They prayed for healing. The Lord didn't heal his dad. The Lord took his dad. So I said, healing doesn't happen all the time, but they're from a mindset where they believe it. And at the end of our conversation, they believe it's going to happen. And at the end of our conversation, he said, Brian, that was a good talk. And that has never, that's a miracle. That's thank you, God. And it is just that, when the guy said, oh, so you still go to that church, I'm like, well, I can't believe he said that in front of a bunch of non-Christians because they're not going to know the difference anyway, I'm like, Lord, that's between you and him. And I just felt like it was at that point where, don't say anything, we're there to do, something, we're there with people. I thought, I'm just going to let it go and just kind of, that's between him and the Lord, and just like, but like you were saying, like I can pray for an opportunity and, like Jen was saying, it's my life that is going to exemplify Jesus, nothing else. And it was St. Francis of Ulysses that said, thank you. When,
Always preach the gospel, use words when
thank
necessary.
you. Yep, that's it.
Yeah. And that what you did, Ryan, is you engaged with the questioner beyond the question. And that's at the heart of true apologetic ministry is you have to engage with the questioner beyond the question.
Yeah.
I remember being in an auditorium where Ravi and a different apologetics person were answering questions, and this one young guy came up, and he was a chaplain in the army, and he asked a question, and you could tell he was wrestling with it. It was heavy on his heart. And the first guy, he just answered the question. You remember? He just answered the question, and he kind of got on his soapbox, and what he said was good. It was good stuff, but it did not meet the questioner where he was at. It completely missed his heart. And then Ravi came up and just blew. I'm just like, oh, that's how you do it. Because he answered his heart, even though he didn't have the answer for the question that he was asking, but he totally met him where he was at. And you could feel it. I mean, you could see the shift. And so that's right there at the heart of true apologetics ministry, is answering the questioner beyond the question. So, all right. Heart of the matter. That's right. All right, let's take a break.
Let's take a break, guys.